Okay, in this lesson we're going to look at regenerating rural places, and specifically we're going to look at how rural areas are rebranding themselves and how local government policies aim to attract inward investment. So what I want to do first in this lesson is just to actually give you a summary of what this lesson is going to cover. So first in general terms, and then we're going to look specifically at Cornwall as an example of regeneration of rural areas. So I want you to focus on being able to write in and think in summary terms whenever you look at a lesson. So first of all, many rural areas have seen a decline in what is known as their old economies. Things like mining, farming, fishing. And as a result, they now are faced with what's called a post-production countryside. So that now consists mainly of tertiary sector employment, quite often seasonal in tourism, and very few knowledge economy jobs. Many rural areas in the UK also have the challenge of geographical isolation. So they're quite remote from the rest of the UK, and especially sort of the economic core of the country. Rural areas do have opportunities for rebranding. Quite often they look at things like its heritage or historic past. They might be looking at diversifying farming, maybe promoting what's called destination tourism. Now the government also has a key role to play. They quite often do that by creating what's known as local enterprise zones, also seeking partnerships with the private sector as well. But obviously you can always look at and question to what extent these strategies have been successful. So this is the main focus, and these sort of sections will come back. So the first one we're going to look at is the post-production countryside. And for that, we're going to look specifically at Cornwall. So Cornwall's old economy mainly consists of primary sector jobs in farming, of course, but also in mining and fisheries. And all jobs in all these sectors have actually declined. In general, these kind of jobs, the jobs that you could get in those sectors, were year-round permanent employment, apart from obviously harvest jobs. Now the new economy, those consist of very few quaternary knowledge economy jobs, but the main sector really in Cornwall is tourism. Now the issue about tourism is that they are mainly low-wage, part-time and seasonal jobs. So obviously in the summer months, in normal circumstances, lots of people go to Cornwall, providing lots of jobs. But it's only in the summer months, and therefore the Cornwall's rural areas are a lot less productive than they used to be. So the challenge is to develop more high income economy that provides these well-paid jobs all year round. So let's have a look at the reasons for the decline of Cornwall's primary sector. So as I said before, there were sort of the key industries with things like farming and fishing, tin mining, but also quarrying is another sector that's part of the primary sector industries. So farming, lots of dairy farming. One of the issues there is the fact that lots of supermarkets are driving down the prices. It's cheaper to import milk from elsewhere, and also the EU subsidies and government grants have also reduced. So for the dairy industry, it's more and more difficult to stay in business. In terms of fishing, there's been lots of overfishing in the area around Cornwall, but also the quota system has meant that lots of fish stocks have been allocated to fishing boats from other EU countries. In terms of tin and copper mining, most of the deposits have all been mined out really, but then also whatever is left, it's not really feasible anymore to get out of the ground. There's cheaper overseas competition, means the tin prices have really collapsed, and therefore it is too expensive to get the tin out. In terms of quarrying, Cornwall actually has some of the largest and best china clay reserves. And in the 1960s, the sector employed 10,000 people. But there's more international competition. China clay can now be sourced cheaper elsewhere, and therefore employment has dropped quite dramatically. And also, the mechanization of the extraction of China clay also means that less people are needed. So, as I said earlier, geographical isolation is another sort of challenge for many rural areas in the UK. And it's the same for Cornwall. If you look at Cornwall, where it's located in the southwest, if you sort of consider this sort of area here as the UK's major economic core, then obviously you can see Cornwall already sort of at least 4 hours away from that core. That also means that these remote areas are quite poorly served by transport infrastructure. As you may remember, sort of for your GCSE, we were looking at the A303. That's sort of one of the main roads that leads to Cornwall and Devon, around here through Dorset, and the fact that that's quite often a major bottleneck for transport. Now, lots of areas, including Cornwall, they're looking at rebranding, trying to find opportunities to make the area more sort of interesting and more appealing for investment. So Cornwall might be looking at sort of its heritage and historic past, but also looking at things like diversifying farming and promoting destination tourism. So, for example, Cornwall's heritage of mining and literary branding, things about sort of like BBC program Poldark, based in Cornwall, and of course its scenery are amongst its sort of assets. But there are other things as well used to try to rebrand Cornwall. So here are some things that Cornwall's doing. Farm diversification, for example, so Cornish food products, pastries. Obviously Cornish pastry is very well known, but there's cheeses, ice cream, beers, wine. These are all sort of products that Cornwall tries to promote as part of that rebranding. Other things that's happening, sort of destination tourism. I'll give you a definition of that in a minute on the next slide, but it's basically encouraging people to visit Cornwall for a short period of time, visiting a specific place and then spending more time elsewhere as well. So it could be a specialist restaurant. There's some specialist restaurants there, Jamie Oliver's restaurant, for example, but also things like the Eden Project. Another draw is spectacular gardens. So the Lost Gardens of Halligan is very famous, but also things like outdoor pursuits and adventure activities as well. So here at the bottom you can see the definition of destination tourism. So that's the decision to visit an area for a short period based on a single attraction. Other nearby places then receive visitors on the back of this. So as you can see, I've given you here a photo of an image of the Eden Project. It's a fantastic place developed in an old quarry mine. And lots of people go specifically to Cornwall to visit the Eden Project, but obviously stay longer and visit other places as well. Now, the same, if you look at what attracts people to a place like Cornwall, it attracts both domestic and international tourists, but different people are sort of attracted for different things. So some people, like from the UK, they might want to go to Cornwall because of scenery, etc. But also, Cornish food is very important as well. Now, that's less important for people from, say, Germany, France, the Netherlands. They are more interested in, say, Cornwall's gardens. They're also sort of amazing beaches, and obviously the fetch is such that you have amazing waves as well. So a lot of surfing competitions take place there, but also sometimes then linked to other things like Broadmasters is basically a festival, and there's an international surfing competition at the same time. So it's trying to rebrand Cornwall, focusing on these different sort of um, strengths it has, focusing on different people. Now, the government also has an important role to play. Um, so, what's happening in Cornwall is that um, it falls into what is an area known as sort of eligible for regional aid. So all these areas here on the map that are in the red color qualify for regional aid. Now, um, these areas were recognized by the European Union as being economically disadvantaged or less advantaged. That's how you want to look at it. And they would therefore qualify to receive government assistance and incentives for investors through funds from the EU, through move towards companies moving there, or set up costs, or the like. So as you can see, there's sort of areas that either sort of part of the UK's periphery, so Scotland, Wales, Cornwall, or they're areas affected by the decline of the old economy. So lots of areas around here, for example, northeast of England, obviously, but around here as well. So these are the two sort of areas that would be eligible for regional aid. There could be money from the EU, or it could be money from the UK government as well. So as part of this regional aid approach, local enterprise zones were created, and by 2015 there were about 44 of those local locations around the UK. And they are sort of they're small areas that can be then branded to attract particular companies and organizations. So they provide different incentives. So for example, council business tax discount for up to 100% for up to 5 years, with a limit of £160,000 per year. Now that's important enough because it could actually help to pay for the creation of say 5 new jobs. Also a planning-free environment, which means no planning permission is needed for building beyond the normal building regulations for safety. And also very important, provision of super fast broadband. So also what happened in order to encourage the development of this sort of new economy, some urban enterprise zones offer tax reductions as well, or the cost, helping with the cost of employing or training new employees. So there's quite a lot is possible there. Now let's have a look at an example of an enterprise zone, and we're looking at Newquay Aero Hub Business Park. So in 2014, Cornwall Council obtained enterprise zone status for the Newquay Aero Hub Business Park. So it's right next to Newquay Airport, and it's a partnership between the council and private sector investors. So the idea is that the main brand is really its location. So it's right next to the airport, attracting investment for aviation aerospace hub, as it were. So the idea was to create sort of 700 high-value, skilled permanent jobs in the first year. Some of the companies that are opened up, so a variety of companies, as you can see here, there's many more. There's about 12 to 14 or something, but quite a range. Just read through that by yourself. Now, the issue was a little bit, although there's about 12 companies, by the end of 2015, only 450 jobs have been created, and few were considered actually new jobs. So several companies created jobs had been displaced from the public sector. So it's part of the privatization drive. And some have just relocated the business park. They've already been in the area, but they're just relocated. So there were actually no new jobs. So actually by 2015, very little new investment had come into Cornwall's new Aero Hub Business Park. So you can question whether it was that successful. So a few tasks for you to think of, especially about rebranding. When you think about Cornwall, what are you thinking of? Does it sort of how does that relate to how Cornwall brands itself?